Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
It sure is.
That is a fact. Thank you for telling me that. The
Is
same
it,
intro
Courtney?
every week.
Courtney, I know the name of this podcast, but thanks for sharing, just in case. You know, like we
Just in
said, we
case
don't.
you forgot what you clicked on. I mean, maybe you just put everything in a queue and you're like, I
Yeah,
don't know what's next.
maybe your other podcast hosts, Courtney and Jacqueline, you get confused and you think that this is their
Is there
show.
another podcast out there with a Courtney and a Jacqueline? I'd like to know that.
Yeah,
I'm
we
sure there
should
is somewhere.
we should look it up and see. I mean, they're two like fairly common names, but they're not like super.
It's not
You
like
know,
a Sarah.
yeah, like an Ashley and Sarah. I
Yeah,
feel like that'd be
because
a
that'd be more
pretty.
common. There did try to be another Caffeinated Crimes, and we had to stop that.
Yeah, we had to shut that shit down real quick. We're like,
I put my
excuse
boss
me.
girl panties on and was like, "Excuse me, ma'am, this is a copyright, and you spelled caffeinated wrong." I literally had to nicely be like, "This is a copyright issue, even with your typo."
Yeah, you're like the only reason you were allowed to enter this is because you spelled it wrong. But this is still our name, so you can't have it, even though you can't spell it.
Yeah.
But they stopped anyway, so I
They
love
were
to
very
love.
nice and very sweet about it.
Yeah.
But I do feel maybe a little bit responsible because then they only released one episode and never again. So I'm like, did we completely destroy their podcast dreams?
No, I think they were one of those pandemic podcasts, like we talked about, that like everyone
Mm-hmm.
got bored in the pandemic and started a podcast, and then real life kind of got back to normal, and then they're like,
And
well,
you
done
realize
with that
how
shit.
much work it is.
Yeah.
It's a
This
lot of
is
work.
not it's not a light hobby, you know? It's quite
This
a
is
time
kind of
intensive
reminding
hobby.
me. I think I had a dream last night about our
Oh.
podcast, and then I had another podcast because I was complaining about research, and I was like, well, I have to research for two podcasts.
Oh.
And now
Do
I
you have
can't
a
remember,
secret podcast that you didn't tell me about, Courtney?
not that I know of, but I've been known to sleepwalk. So,
I was like, Courtney has showered in her sleep and fully gotten ready for
yes,
the day. So maybe Courtney has a sleep podcast that
I
she
have
does.
showered, shaved, washed my hair, put my contacts in, and did not wake up until I was walking back to my room soaking wet.
Yeah. So let us know if that's ever happened to you, because I feel like Courtney's an anomaly, but maybe there are more of you out there.
Yeah, I know like sleepwalking is kind of common. And we've seen the girl on TikTok who does like extra crazy shit when she's
Yeah.
in her sleep. But usually I just talk nonsense or just do kind of weird things. Like one night in
Hmm.
the middle of the night, I mean, obviously there's a sleep showering, which I did a few times, which is like real crazy. But there was one time I had nail polish on like a table by my bed and I had like opened them both and switched the brushes. So it was like purple and red, and I like switched the brushes. So the next time I opened it, I was like, why is this a different color? There was one time I found a piece of paper where I had just like been writing on it, but it was
I
just like
mean,
swivels.
okay, are you sure you're not like possessed? Like, is
I
this
don't
sleepwalking or
know.
is this a demon? Like, I think we need to clarify
I
this
haven't done it in
situation.
a really long time. I mostly did it, I feel like when I was extra stressed. Like it was
Yeah,
college where it was like really bad, where it was like I have
yeah.
50 things due. And I think my body was just trying to like let me sleep, but get ready, you know?
It's like, okay, like we'll multitask here is what we'll do.
Yeah. Just kind of
Oh.
crazy stuff. But let me know what you do in your sleep. I talk a lot. I've texted before.
Hmm.
But yeah, Kevin says all the time that I will just say stuff and he'll just be like, "What?" And then I'm just like, "You asshole. Why don't you understand me?" Like he's like, you get so aggressive.
He's like, I'm just gonna leave you be,
He just thinks
actually.
it's funny. I feel like sometimes he just keeps interacting with me just to
Oh
see what
yeah.
I'll say. Like
Entertaining.
yeah.
He needs to record it and we'll share it with you guys in case you guys are interested.
It'll literally
But
sound like gibberish.
so yeah, so that's what we got for you today. Do have a couple of updates before we get into today's episode. So two like super sad, super scary updates. So sorry about that. So a train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio this week, and it released this toxic chemical called vinyl chloride, which I guess is used to make like car parts and like PVC piping or something like that. But basically, like the train derailed, and it just like there's pictures of it as this mushroom cloud like over this city. And so residents within a 2-mile radius were ordered to evacuate because this chemical is deadly when breathed in. But they were allowed to return a few days later, which seems like a very short period of time when you have this deadly chemical just like in the
Yeah.
air. Like, And then now like people's pets are dropping dead, like the fish in the streams are dying, like chickens, like foxes, like just all these animals that are just dead for no other apparent reason in this very specific area where this chemical was released. So Norfolk Southern, which is the rail company responsible, gave a whopping $25,000 to this town of 5,000 residents to assist with the displacement, which is, Courtney's doing the math on her phone. It's like $5 a person or something.
Yeah, I'm like, that is
Yeah.
not a lot per person.
Like what is that going to do for you?
$5 a person,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah. So, yeah, and they're like, "Oh, well, here's this because of this whole displacement." And it's like displacement, like that's the last thing on my mind is like what are these long-term health effects? Like how many people are getting cancer because of this? How many people are not going to reproduce or their children are going to have these birth defects or all this stuff like from this toxic chemical that you are currently breathing in because you were put back in your home. And oh yeah, and here's $5 to help with your display for a
That
hotel
doesn't
room
even
for two
cover
nights.
the hotel
Like
room that you had
like
to spend. Like, even if you are just thinking of like the inconvenience
literally
of being
just yeah.
evacuated, of
That
that's not
doesn't
even a tank of
cover
gas.
yeah, that's not a bottle of water in the hotel room that you had to
Yeah.
stay in for two
That's a
days.
tank and a half of gas
Yeah,
at most,
just
which is not going to get you
horrific.
that far.
Nope, not very far. So yeah, so I guess we will see
Where is
what
East Palestine, Ohio, in Ohio? Do you know?
so it's on the state's border with Pennsylvania. So
Okay.
like
So
east.
kind of near like Pittsburgh-ish area.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Pittsburgh's in Pennsylvania. I just meant like up in that little
Yeah, yeah,
section.
like in that general area. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, super scary. So hopefully yeah, I don't even know what do you do in that situation because how like can you test the air and see like is this chemical still there? Like how do you even go about knowing when it's safe to return, you know?
I don't know. I don't feel like you could test the air, could you? I mean, you
Yeah,
could test
I
maybe
don't think
things
so.
around like the grass
Yeah.
and like things in your home maybe, but just the
Yeah.
air? I don't know how far studies are into this chemical and like what are
Yeah, same. I don't have enough information here.
if there's any chemists out there who
Yeah.
know how any of this works, just go ahead and tell us.
We would love to share.
And in depressing news as well, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which I think top is like 10. So this is like a very
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
earthquake, like kind of unheard of big earthquake, occurred in Turkey and Syria on February 6th. So at the time of this recording, which is about a weekish before it's released, they had reported there were 33,000 dead and tens of thousands injured. And they're still trying to dig up rubble and find, different people. Like I just read how like a 2-month-old was found, a 10-year-old girl was found. Like they're still trying to find people. So I'm
Yeah.
sure the death rate is going to continue to rise because it didn't say how many were missing. I don't even know if they know because
Oh
it
yeah.
was such a big area. Basically I was showing Jacqueline before we recorded how this Instagram site like compared how big it was to like Europe and like America. And like basically in America, it would be covering from like New Haven, Connecticut to like past DC into Virginia. Like that big of a
Like
section.
a huge area.
Yeah. And so this is affecting a lot of people. And there are, I've seen a bunch of different organizations. I know Glennon Doyle has an organization. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they're at the moment currently donating. She seems like a good source to donate where it would actually go to it versus some
Hmm.
other organizations that keep most of the money for themselves.
Yeah.
But just try to find good, reliable places to donate or just anything you can do to help.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, now that you're depressed, let's keep making you depressed.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
I mean, it has a semi not happy ending, but closure ending
Ish. Yeah.
ish, you know. Anyway. And just as a trigger warning here, we are going to talk a little bit about child sexual assault, child abuse, and this is the death of children. So if that is something you're uncomfortable listening to or just really don't want to listen to, I would just go ahead and put that trigger warning here and maybe just skip this episode. So our sources for this episode are the Keeper of the Ashes, the Oklahoma Girl Scout Murders documentary series. We did review a few other news articles, but there was no new information or information covered was outdated. So most of this does come from that documentary.
Yeah, like some of the information was backed up in like lots of other like local, news articles, but then it's like, okay, well, it's all covered in this main documentary too, so we don't really need to list every single other source that included the same information. Or like we said, some of the information was like when this happened, like back in the 70s, and that information was also included in the documentary, or the information that wasn't is outdated and is no longer accurate. So
yeah.
Just didn't want you to think that we like solely watched one source and then was like, well, that's it. Like we did dig deeper into it.
We do try to fact check.
Yes.
To the best of our, we might still get it wrong and you can let us know.
Please do.
But we try. Just know that.
Yes.
So Camp Scott was a Girl Scout camp that started in 1949 in Locust Grove, Oklahoma. Every summer, girls of all ages would gather at the camp for a week or two and engage in a variety of activities with each other. In 1977, 3 young girls were murdered at this camp, and the camp would then close forever. So on June 12th, 1977, Girl Scouts from across the state of Oklahoma arrived at Camp Scott ready for 2 weeks of fun and adventure. So the camp was secluded and about 2 miles off of the main road on what was called the Cookie Trail, which it's also Girl Scout cookie season, everyone. Go get your cookies.
I did have about 5 yesterday. So yes, it is.
Yeah, it's just the cookie trail made me think of that. So just trying to do a little lightness in this really depressing episode.
Try to add the lightness where we can, where it's also not disrespectful. So
exactly.
Go get your Girl Scout cookies.
Yes. So the units where the girls would sleep were about 400 feet from each other, but they were very thick woods in between, so it seemed even more secluded. So they were kind of close to each other, but you still kind of felt like on your own in your tent. So the first day was hot and humid, and a big thunderstorm rolled in during dinner. The rain finally slowed down enough that the campers and counselors could hike back down to their units from the dining hall. So the counselors tried to get some of the girls to settle down, as some were like active and excited. It's the first night, so you're just like all adrenaline and you're so excited to be around everyone.
Just wired.
Yeah. But others were homesick. But all of the campers wrote letters to their parents that night. So after going to sleep that night, 18-year-old camp counselor Carla Wilhite woke up twice when she heard campers in nearby tents talking and giggling. Then she woke up again to a strange sound coming from a road that leads away from their unit. She would later describe the noise as something between like a moan and a growl, but just kind of unlike anything she'd ever heard before. So she did crawl out of her tent with her flashlight to investigate the noise, but the sound stopped as soon as she got closer, but would start again when she backed away, like back to her tent. So she's like, this is probably some animal. Like, it sees me coming, it stops, I go back, it starts again. Like, I'm sure it's just something out here in these woods. So she woke up the next morning when her alarm went off at 6 a.m. and she got ready for the campers. So outside of her tent, she saw something in the road to her right. And after looking closer, she realized there were sleeping bags that looked kind of like bunched up. So, as we said, it had rained the night before. So she's like, let me unroll them. Let me let them dry. But as soon as she got closer to the sleeping bags, she could see one of the young campers lying unclothed and partially on the road. Her first thought was that a girl had gotten like scared in the middle of the night and tried to run away. Somehow maybe she hit a tree, something like that. Possibly that's how she died. Because like a murder in a Girl Scout camp is just like unheard of. It's like, we're just a bunch of kids here. Like, this doesn't happen.
Like, that would not be your first thought if you like see this girl who's like dead in the middle of this Girl Scout camp. Like, I can't blame her for that being her first thought,
Yeah. I mean, she's 18. Again, she's a child herself.
Yeah.
So Carla woke up the other counselors and the camp director and told them there was a dead girl in the road and they needed to wake everyone up and see who was missing. So they went into the tents and physically touched each girl as they counted and verified names. So they realized all 3 of the girls from tent 7 were missing. So 8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michelle Guse, and 10-year-old Denise Milner had been assigned to the tent number 7. So the Sunday before camp, Denise Milner was hesitant to leave for a week, but her mom found a nice counselor at the Girl Scout headquarters and asked if she could sit with her on the bus. Denise's mom also asked her to help Denise call home if she got homesick, and the counselor's like, of course, like, I'll help her. You know, it's kind of scary, but she's going to have a great time. Like, I'll help her out. The counselor described Denise as an old soul, and she wanted to make sure she found friendship at the camp. Denise's mom said she was exceptionally smart and taught herself to read, write, and do math at 4 years old, which is impressive because I'm 28 and can barely do math myself.
Yes.
So she loved talking with people and would always find someone to have a chat with, like, everywhere she went. She wanted to be a part of everything, and the counselor helped Denise to her tent when the bus arrived at Camp Scott. So the letter she wrote home to her mom that night said, "I don't like camp. It's awful. I don't want to stay for 2 weeks. Like, I want to come home and see everyone." So again, just very homesick.
Yeah, which has to be like so hard for her mom later to be like, she was so unhappy like that last night. But it's also like, if this hadn't happened, like, I'm sure she would have ended up having a great time. You know, like, it wasn't like this camp was this horrible place to be or whatever. She's just like, oh, I'm just like super homesick. But like, I'm sure she got to like do the activities and hang out with her friends and everything, that she would have ended up enjoying it, you know?
Yeah, I feel like Kevin tells the story a lot too when he was a kid, and like his dad would always be like, "You're playing baseball," and he's like, "I don't want to play baseball. I don't want to do it." And then once he started playing, he was like, "I'm really glad I did it. I had a lot of fun." Like, sometimes it's
Yeah.
one of those things you just kind of have to like be like, "Come on, you're gonna have fun. Like, just do it."
Hmm.
And then you never expect this to be the outcome. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so Lori Farmer would have been turning 9 the next week and had a birthday party planned for the weekend. She returned home from camp. Lori was the oldest of 5 children, and her parents said she loved being a big sister and taking care of them. She was very smart and vibrant, and her peers described her as someone that was nurturing to all those around her. Michelle Guse was an athletic girl, and her mom was a local teacher. Her family did choose not to participate, like with the documentary. They weren't interviewed, and unfortunately, there's just really no additional information like available about Michelle in articles online. So that's kind of all we really have about her.
I found a couple of like from like the Find a Grave sites that I'm pretty sure both of her parents were deceased at the time of the documentary. So I don't know if there were not other people who like could have been interviewed, or if the people in her family who are left, you know, chose not to. But so I don't know if that's a fact, but I'm pretty sure both of her parents are deceased at this point.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes this far, because this is 1977 and the documentary was only made a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah, like this
Because it was
year.
released this year or
Yeah,
last year.
it was released in September of 2022. So yeah, so it would have
Yeah.
been made within the last few years. Yeah.
So the camp director's husband was an ER nurse, and when he heard about the girl, he ran to help her on the road, and he discovered that the other 2 girls from Tent 7 were also dead and shoved down inside the sleeping bags. It's now clear this is a murder. This is not an accident, so the camp did call the police. The media quickly got wind of this story and arrived at the gate of the camp. A couple of select journalists known to Sheriff Pete Weaver were let in to photograph the scene, but most of the media had to wait outside the secured gate. We don't need a bunch of journalists trampling through a murder scene, especially since this is
Yeah.
the 70s, and I'm sure it probably wasn't that great anyway.
Yeah. And I wasn't completely sure from the documentary if like this journalist like had some kind of contract like with the police department, like 'cause it's a one specific journalist that was interviewed who like took the crime scene photos. So I'm like, typically journalists today don't do that, but again, it was the 70s, so like it could have been a little bit different, or it's like maybe he
Yeah.
also, you know, did the photographs for the police department. So kind of that's why it's a little weird with like, okay, some of the journalists were let in, but that kind of that's what I gathered, which might be incorrect. But
Yeah. And I don't know this kind of smaller town in Oklahoma if they did how much of their crime scene investigation unit they had, where they're like, well, we
yeah,
need pictures.
absolutely.
I know you're upstanding. Come on, come get me
Yeah,
pictures.
yeah, for sure.
So meanwhile, the camp counselors had to get the other campers out of the area without passing the bodies. So they told them they were going on a punishment hike for keeping the counselor up the night before. So they're like, we just got to get something to distract these girls.
Yeah.
They had them sing songs to keep them distracted, and more local deputies arrived within 30 to 45 minutes. They determined that the girls were found about 150 feet from their tent, but there were no indications they'd been killed at the spot, and there was like no drag marks. So deputies believe they were killed elsewhere and then carried to this spot. The sheriff did announce to the public that there was evidence of sexual assault, and there was a lot of blood inside the tent, and blood was found on the outside of the girls' tent at about adult shoulder height. So the sheriff believed the girls were killed inside the tent, and the killer carried them out in the sleeping bag, like over his shoulder. So loose ligatures were found around the girl's neck, and it was thought that he used them to guide them like out of the tent. At least one of the girls was duct taped to a tree with a gag, and her hands bound behind her at some point. Their bodies were bruised, indicating they had been beaten. So the executive director of the Girl Scouts Council arranged for buses to come and take the other campers back to their families in Tulsa. So the media had run the story that 3 girls at the camp were dead, but no names were released. The buses were delayed an hour while all of the campers' families waited at the headquarters in Tulsa to find out if their children were okay. So you're just showing up and you're like, is my kid going to be on this bus?
Yeah, like literally just waiting for this bus to finally get there to find out if your child was one of the girls that were killed. Like, I cannot even imagine what those parents were going through at that time.
Yeah. So Lori Farmer's dad was finishing the night shift in the emergency room when he got a call to the nurse's station. The executive director of the Girl Scouts was calling to tell him that his daughter was found dead outside her tent that morning, and he had no other information at that time. His partner took him home to tell his wife, and she knew immediately when he arrived home that something was wrong. So police found Denise's mom at work and told her that the 3 girls had been beaten to death at the camp and that her daughter was one of them. She had her cousin call the medical examiner, who had told her that her daughter had been strangled. The town of Locust Grove was in a panic because a multiple murderer was on the loose. They're like, this person came and killed 3 very young girls. Like, what is happening? And one of the camp counselors reported that her purse had been ransacked the night of the murders, and Carla's guitar capo was found nearby, indicating that someone had gone through the counselor's tent as well. So another camper reported someone shining a flashlight into their tent in the middle of the night. So when talking with the campers, they learned that others heard the same sound as Carla, and some heard screams around 3 a.m. It was later revealed that 2 months before, a counselor at the camp discovered her stuff had been ransacked, and donuts had been stolen from a donut box, and a note was left inside that said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1," which is pretty scary.
Yeah, very eerie.
So the director of the camp just thought it was a prank and didn't contact police.
Which I'm like, like I understand it because you're like, oh, like this isn't anything, but it's like, okay, someone is also threatening to kill Girl Scouts at your camp. Like maybe just let the police know. Maybe do your due diligence and pass it on to someone to look into, you know?
I'm also like, if you're immediately like, oh, this is a prank, like, do you get weird notes left like frequently?
Right? Like, has this
Like,
happened
I'm
before?
wondering, like,
What?
is this, yeah, like, I don't know. Very weird. So the day the girls were murdered, police set out searching the entire camp and surrounding areas for any clues as to who committed this heinous crime. So they found a large flashlight with duct tape over the light part that made just a small hole that only a small amount of light would be like let through. So it's just like just a little bit can be, you know,
like a way to kind of like, yeah, like the person would need to see what they're doing, but also try not to like attract too much attention by having this like big bouncing light all over the place.
Mm-hmm. They also found a pair of glasses and other objects scattered throughout the camp that seemed out of place. It wasn't until the county coroner arrived and unzipped the sleeping bags that someone thought they should have opened the bags before to make sure the girls were not still alive inside. So they're like, you didn't double check?
Which is horrifying to think that like,
Unfortunately, all 3 of the girls were confirmed dead at the time. So the police believe that Lori and Michelle were murdered first inside the tent, and that Denise was murdered and sexually assaulted where all 3 bodies were found. And based on the flashlight found nearby, they assumed that when Carla's alarm went off at 6 a.m., the murderer heard it, was startled, and hurried away from the scene. So the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, or also known as OSBI, was assigned to the case. They investigated all of the camp counselors, even though they were pretty sure the suspect was a male. They quickly ruled out all of the camp counselors as being involved and moved on to local property owners. When they didn't find any suspects there, they set up organized searches of the surrounding areas to find evidence that might lead to a suspect. So Locust Grove was like an old area with a lot of abandoned farmhouses with cellars, and they believed someone could be like hiding out in one of them. So in a local cave/cellar, these words were kind of used interchangeably, like it was attached to a house. They did find 4 little fires built at the opening of the cave. So this area of the country has a large Native American population, and OSBI Native American agent Harvey Pratt immediately thought this was a ritual ceremony and was worried that they were now looking for a Native American man. Also inside the cave were a pair of sunglasses that a camp counselor had reported as missing, tape that matched the flashlight, and photographs that appeared to have no significance. So given the other evidence in the cave, police released the photos to the media to see if anyone recognized like these individuals. So some people came forward that these were like their wedding photos, and they named the photographer who did them. And when speaking with the photographer, they learned that an inmate named Leroy Hart had worked as his assistant a few years before during a prison work release program. Hart had escaped from prison 4 years before and had been on the run since then. Those photos were also stolen from the sheriff's office when Hart escaped. So even more damning, the cave the photos were found in was attached to the house that belonged to Hart's mother.
Yeah, so a lot of circumstantial evidence piling up here. So Gene Leroy Hart was considered an All-American boy. He went to Locust Grove High School, where he played football and was well-liked in the community. He received scholarship offers to play football in college, but decided to stay in Locust Grove, where he got married young and had a child. So instead of going to college, he started working at Flint Steel, but his marriage did soon break up. Then in 1966, Hart kidnapped 2 pregnant women at gunpoint in Tulsa. He took them into the woods, where he bound them with rope and took turns raping them. Hart left them for dead, but thankfully they were found and did survive. Hart was charged and convicted of rape, kidnapping, and burglary, and he was sentenced to 145 to 305 years in prison. So having the women bound and tied to a tree also really matched the crime scene of these girls. So in 1973, Hart's mom snuck him a nail file into the Mays County Jail, and he escaped by sawing through the bars. 10 days later, he was recaptured and returned to jail, and he then escaped a second time and was still on the run 4 years later when Lori, Denise, and Michelle were murdered. And many reported seeing Hart just around town during those 4 years, but he was never able to be captured. So people are just oh yeah, I saw him over here, but somehow he was never recaptured during that time.
Is this just a town that's snitches get stitches? I ain't saying shit.
Probably. I mean, well, yeah, we'll get into some of why that might be.
Yeah, just and he was I don't really want to. That's not my business. That's not my business.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. So he was 33 years old in 1977. So 10 days after the murders, as many as 600 to 700 people gathered to search for Gene Leroy Hart. So the search was organized by the local sheriff's office, OSBI agents, reservists, and the Tulsa Police Department. So it's just massive search. They did search nearby fields, cellars, and they used helicopters, and canine tracking dogs were brought in from out of state. So many times they would just catch this scent coming from the trail and then abruptly stop and just appear confused. There's just this person disappeared out of nowhere. They would be on a scent and then they're just oh man, it's gone. I don't know. So there were rumors that Hart was some kind of shapeshifter, and he was able to turn into an animal, and that's how he got away. So this also played into the ideas of why he was able to avoid being captured for so long despite the sightings of him. So people are oh, he's this Native American man that can just turn into a wolf and run away, and that's why no one's ever caught him. And that's kind of the rumors that were going around. And 2 of the tracking dogs also died shortly after they were involved in the search, and so many blamed Hart and said that he was using this Native American magic on them. So But many in the community did not believe that Hart could have done this, despite his previous convictions for similar crimes that he pled guilty to. But the Native American community really supported him and didn't trust the white policemen and attorneys involved. So this kind of goes back to like why many in the community like would not say something, because they're like, he's one of our own. Like, we're not going to turn him over to the white man, basically.
Yeah, I had a feeling like I feel like that
Yeah.
happens a lot. Like kind of reminds me of like the Beverly Jackson case that we did
Yeah.
recently where it was like this guy was going around like telling the story, and then even when the guy like came forward to like tell them, like everyone turned against him. They're like, why are you doing that? Like the
Yeah.
police are not on our side. The police are not helping us. Like how dare you help the police? Like
Mm-hmm.
feel like that happens a
Exactly.
lot. I mean, and it makes sense. Look at what the police has done. Like
Yeah.
even I'm sure worse back then and even today, just the same.
Yeah. But this did make it even more difficult for the victims' families because they like constantly have these people in the community telling them like what a great guy Hart is. Like, there's no way he could have done this. Like in the documentary, they talked about being at like the grocery store and like people would stop them and be like, you know, like Leroy Hart, he's just such a good guy. Like I know he didn't do this. And like imagine being like the mother of one of these girls and someone is telling this to you about the suspect that they're looking for that they think murdered your daughter. Like just
Yeah.
um So the police did believe that someone in the Native American community was hiding him, but others believed that police focused on one suspect too quickly and put all their resources into locating him instead of exploring other possible suspects, which I can totally see. I mean, they
Yeah, because I
pretty
mean, a six to
quickly,
700 people search for one man.
yeah,
That's a lot. That's a lot of resources right there for one
yeah,
person.
exactly. Because it's like once the photographs were found and the photographer's like, oh yeah, like someone helped me take these pictures who is now escaped from prison, and they're just like, boom, that is the person. Full speed ahead, let's go. I mean, also they were found in his mom's old house, so that I
I
get
mean,
it, but
it definitely makes sense why they would focus in on him, and
yeah,
they need to question him because that is the best lead they have so
yeah,
far. But I also do understand it sounds like maybe they didn't try to look at any other evidence
hmm
that could have been
yeah,
there.
for sure. And a lot of people also believed that Sheriff Pete Weaver had a personal vendetta against Hart because he had escaped twice from his jail, which again I can also see. So the manhunt continued, but none of the leads really panned out. So the OSBI Native American agent Harvey Pratt was asked to go undercover and have a few drinks with other local Native Americans and see what he could find out. So police received a tip about a local medicine man named Sam Pigeon who worked for a nearby tree nursery. So this person believed that Pigeon was hiding Hart in Cookston Hills. So Cookston Hills is like a really wide and rural area that was known for like these anti-authority gunfights, like Pretty Boy Floyd and Bonnie and Clyde. Like they're like shit's going down if he's like hiding over here. Like it was a pretty easy area like to hide out in because it was just so like wide, expansive, rural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the OSBI agent Pratt said that he went to his own medicine man before going to Cookston Hills to bless his own bullets in case he had to use them, even though he didn't want to. Because I mean, he has to be in such a difficult position of like, this is like my Native American brother. Like, I don't want to have to harm him, but like, I also think he harmed these other three girls, one of which I'm pretty sure was Native American. But again, the information is so limited that I'm not positive and I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
share incorrect information. But some of the sources did say that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so OSBI located Sam Pigeon's wife and told her they believed he was hiding Jean Leroy Hart. And Agent Pratt told her that if he apprehended Hart, he wouldn't kill him, but some others who got a hold of him might. So this kind of convinced her, and she got in the car with him and took him to a little cabin on the side of the road. So OSBI agents and local police surrounded the cabin so Hart couldn't get away. He did try escaping out the back door, but he saw the police there and then tried to run out the front, but he was surrounded. And the OSBI agents told Hart, they're like, you don't want to die today. Like, just please don't. And he did stop running and was handcuffed. So Jean Leroy Hart was finally arrested on April 6, 1978, 10 months after the murders. And Sam Pigeon said that Hart had talked to him about the murders, but he said he didn't do it. So he's like, he did talk about them, but like in the fact that he was saying that he's not responsible.
Mm-hmm.
He was arraigned on 3 counts of first-degree murder. So it would be another year before Hart would go to trial. So they had trouble finding anyone for the jury pool from the community that wasn't sympathetic to Hart. And Lori Farmer's mom believed that like they wouldn't really get a fair trial because he did have so much support. And because so much of the area did consist of Native Americans, they really distrusted the government, which obviously rightly so, based on our country's history of mistreatment of Native Americans. So basically they didn't want to see one of their own be wrongfully convicted. Like, even if he was responsible, like they were like erring so much on the side of like, we don't want him to get convicted for something he didn't do.
It kind of reminds me of the O.J. Simpson case, how it happened like right after like the Rodney King riots and with like the police brutality. And so then like a lot of the Black community was just like, here they go again, like attacking a Black man, and just kind of like, and I'm not saying that was like all of what happened. Obviously, there was many missteps in the whole trial, but I feel like that happened a lot where they were just kind of like, yeah, he might have done it, he probably did it, but we also like, you keep beating us up, like we need a win, like basically.
Yeah, for sure. So Hart did have several high-profile attorneys offered to assist him pro bono, but he did decline because he's like, I'm not guilty, so I don't need these famous criminal defense attorneys. And he did hire attorneys Gary Pitchlin and Garvin Isaacs from Oklahoma City. So more than 100 witnesses testified at the preliminary hearing, which was the longest preliminary hearing in Oklahoma history at the time. So the district attorney for the area was Sid Wise, who was a banker lawyer who ran for the DA after the other DA quit. And he had no experience as a criminal prosecuting attorney, and it really showed. So before the trial started, it was discovered that Wise was sharing OSBI reports with a journalist because he had a contract to write a book about the case. And he did lie about this when asked under oath, which did lead to the public opinion turning against him. So because the case was now compromised, Sid Wise did agree to step down, and Buddy Falls from Tulsa came in to try the case. So he had tried thousands of cases and had a much better reputation as a prosecutor, but like they're just not starting out on a good foot here.
Yeah, and a banker lawyer and a criminal lawyer, those are two very different things.
Yeah, like they were like, different. He's never seen the inside of a courtroom. Like he doesn't do this. Like,
yeah, it's not the same. Like you get your like specialty, and it's like, just because you're a lawyer does not mean it can transfer to everything.
They're very, very different specialties. Yeah. So finally, 19 months after the murders, Hart went to trial in March of 1979. The courthouse was full, and many of the spectators were there in support of Hart. So the prosecution brought up the evidence against Hart, including the flashlight, the glasses, the photographs. The flashlight did have a fingerprint on the lens, but it was inconclusive, so they couldn't really get anything out of it, which the defense used to say, like, oh, there was a fingerprint on the flashlight that wasn't a match to Hart. And the prosecution's like, well, like, that's true, but it's also not a match to anyone because it's incomplete and inconclusive. Like, it's not like, oh, it matches someone, but not him. It's like, no, it doesn't match anyone. Like, we don't know if it's his or not.
Like, it doesn't exclude him. It doesn't include anybody, basically.
Exactly. Exactly. But the defense also claimed that the evidence was planted because of Sheriff Weaver's vendetta against Hart, which doesn't seem too far out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, we've seen it at this time. Exactly. I mean, it happens. It does.
Exactly. Especially for like someone that you already have a vendetta against. He's escaped twice from your jail. He's already in prison for life for hurting these other women. And then now you need to be responsible for getting the person who killed these 3 little girls in your community. Like, it's not far-fetched that he might do something like that.
Yeah.
So the prosecutor also tried to claim that sperm linked Hart to the crimes, but an expert testified that like it was just a high likelihood that the sperm was a match and not like a definitive like we see today with DNA where it's like, oh, yeah, this is a match. They're like, oh, it like points toward him, but we can't say for sure.
Is it one of those things like back in the day where it was like secretor versus non-secretor kind of thing? Like kind of something like that where it's like there's certain like they couldn't really, they're like, oh, it's like the same blood type or they're a secretor versus non-secretor, blah, blah, blah. Like stuff like that where it's like, well, that matches, but also matches like a bunch of other people.
Hundreds of thousands of other people. Yeah, they didn't get into like the specifics of it, but it was like, oh, all these things like don't exclude him, but they also don't like confirm it was him.
Yeah.
So Hart was allowed to hold a press conference, and he was able to answer like pre-screened questions from reporters. So they weren't allowed to address his crimes, but they asked him things like how he was being treated in jail, how he thought the media portrayed him, what he thought about Watergate, just like letting this person on trial for the murder of 3 girls just like talk about all this random shit.
Yeah.
So obviously this continued to make it even more difficult for the families who were like seeing him in the public eye so much and like receiving all this attention and support. It's like they just cannot escape it. And the defense claimed that they were trying to like humanize him, and it appeared to be working. So on March 31st, 1979, the jury found Gene Leroy Hart not guilty on all counts after only 5 hours of deliberation. So he was sent back to the Oklahoma State Penitentiary to finish his life sentence for the other women he had kidnapped and raped. So Lori Farmer's family felt like they had been victimized twice now after going through this trial and not getting any kind of justice. And Lori's belongings had been held by the sheriff's office this whole time as evidence, and her family asked for all of them back following the trial. But hundreds of items did still remain in state custody for possible forensic testing. So less than 3 months after the trial, Gene Leroy Hart was jogging and lifting weights in the prison yard when he collapsed and died from a heart attack. So there were immediately conspiracies that he was like poisoned or beaten to death, but the autopsy did show 90% blockage of an artery. And Hart's brother had also died of a heart attack at 36 years old. So it's like, okay, people are trying to say that, you know, this is a big conspiracy, but it's also like, there's pretty solid evidence here that he just had a heart attack.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it just happens.
Yeah. So Hart's funeral was held at the local high school gym with more than 2,000 people in attendance. Like, even after his death, just like so much support, even while he is currently in prison for raping these 2 other pregnant women. Like,
that is crazy to me. And like, I understand like you want to stand behind like someone in your community, but just to like, and even, you know, if you're like, he did not do that to those 3 girls, but it's like he admitted to these other crimes.
Exactly. It's wild.
I don't get it.
So in 2013, so we're skipping several decades now. So this whole time, like, this is technically a cold case because the case is still open because this person was acquitted. So they're like, technically, we don't know who did this. So in 2013, the new sheriff, Mike Reed, took office in Mays County, and within 2 days, Lori Farmer's family arrived, asking him to take another look at everything. So like, oh, new person. Okay, here we go. Like, this whole time still fighting for justice for their daughter. So the new sheriff started reconstructing the crime scene and examining the evidence again. So he believed that the random objects that were found scattered throughout the camp indicated that someone was like walking around the camp and maybe even like scouting out like different tents. And since another camper had also reported someone shining a light in their tent and counselors had items stolen from their purses, Reed believed that this was premeditated and that the killer purposefully chose the tent that he did. It also appeared that the killer brought his own rope with him, again, leading to premeditation and not just a crime of opportunity. So there was only blood from 2 of the girls inside the tent, which pointed to the original sheriff's theory that Lori and Michelle were killed inside the tent and Denise was killed outside. So Cheryl Stokes was a classmate of Lori Farmer's who went on to work for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children because of Lori. So she did reach out to Lori's mom after all these years because she had cold case money and she wanted to dedicate it to their case. So she started a forensic review of the evidence to see what was left that could be tested using new technology. And as of 2013, only 1 item had been sent off for DNA testing, and there were approximately 400 other pieces of evidence that had been preserved in this case. So the one piece of evidence that had already been tested was a semen sample that was sent to the FBI for testing in the late 80s. And the new technology at that time also pointed to Hart, but again, was not conclusive. So same pattern here. So the local community raised $30,000 for additional DNA testing, and many of the items were too degraded for accurate testing, but they were able to test some hair and semen to form DNA profiles. So because the evidence was partially degraded and so old, it wasn't conclusive, but again, did strongly point to Gene Leroy Hart. And this evidence also ruled out every other suspect they had in the case. So they were able to definitively rule out anyone else they were looking at and strongly point to this man, even though, again, it was not 100% conclusive. But at this point, like, pretty much everyone is convinced that this is the man that did it. But it's also kind of misleading because a lot of the headlines even say like DNA solves cold case, and it's like it didn't though. Like it never like confirmed that this was the man. It just strongly pointed towards him and ruled out anyone else they were considering. So like pretty
Yeah.
strongly, but it's not like a for sure. So, two of the victims' families sued the Magic Empire Council, who ran the Girl Scouts of Eastern Oklahoma, for $5 million, claiming negligence. So, the jurors did vote 9-3 in favor of the Magic Empire Council. And Michelle's father, Richard Guse, helped pass state legislation called the Oklahoma Victims Bill of Rights. And he also founded the Oklahoma Crime Victims Compensation Board. And Lori's mother, Sherry Farmer, founded the Oklahoma chapter of the Parents of Murdered Children Support Group. So that is the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders of Lori Farmer, Michelle Guse, and Denise Milner.
Just so sad and so heartbreaking because you just think like a Girl Scout camp, like you're just going to go and, just learn such other stuff. Like I personally was never in the Girl Scouts, but I did get to go on a trip with one of my friends one time who was in the Girl Scouts, and like her mom was like a part of it. I can't remember. We went to some cabin thing, but it was like really fun, and it was like we just like did little face masks and like made little things, like just having fun with like other girls and just creating like friendships and stuff like that. And it's like you just expect your kid to have this like great experience and like learn all this stuff, and then like this is what happens.
Yeah, like I was a Girl Scout for like I don't know, like 7 years. Like I was a Girl Scout for a long time, and like we always like went to camp and stuff, but like my mom always came with me because like she was a leader, so like I always got to have her there with me. So that that helped too. But yeah, it's just like and we stayed in like cabins, so you had like doors that had locks. Like you weren't like in a tent in the middle of the woods where, like we said, it's like they were like 400 feet apart. So I mean, like a distance enough, but like it also seemed much more secluded because it was just so like thickly like populated with trees and
trees
brush
and stuff like that.
But yeah, just imagining like something happening like that, and I wonder if the negligence suit comes from like there's 3 girls alone in this tent. Like you don't have a counselor in every tent with every girl. Cause I mean, 8, 9, and 10 years old, and you're like sleeping alone in a tent in the middle of the woods. Like, yikes. But I mean, it's the 70s.
Even
like
your
it's
counselors
different.
are 18. You know what I mean? I feel like even that, it's like everyone is just so young. Like I feel like
who is the adult? Where is the adult in this situation?
Not to like say it like this also, because it sounds like I'm trying to like make light of it, but like you see all the time in like these horror movies where like they go to camp and it's like these like 16, 17-year-old counselors like trying to help these kids, and it's like everyone here is a child. Like, everyone here is a child.
Like, sure, you can have your junior counselors who are like trying on those leadership roles and doing those things, but like you also should have actual like adults who are there as well. And I don't know if that could have prevented something like this, because obviously like this man could have killed the adult in the tent as well. But I mean, you feel like there would have been a little more chance, or I don't know. It's like, cause it's 1-3, but 3 like very small girls, like they're not physically big. Like it's very easy to like just pick them up and carry them and take them where you need them to go.
And also they're so young. If someone's like, don't make a noise, like don't do this. I have a knife, like you're scared. You know what I mean? Like, and like, I do wonder if they did have an older counselor with them, like what would have happened? Like, would he have not done it? Or would also that counselor be dead as well? You know what I mean? Like, that's like kind of the hard thing, is it's like, what would have happened? Like, it sounded, I mean, if that note was, if Leroy Hart did commit these murders and he is the one who left that note, would he have just done it no matter what? Like,
so just super sad and super tragic. And hopefully the family members who are still alive do feel like they have some closure after this new DNA evidence. But again, I know it's just been so hard for them all these years with him having so much support, in the community. It's like so many people thinking that he didn't do it, and you never feeling like you really got that closure for the person who murdered your child.
Yeah.
So that being said, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is, I have talked before about the workout app subscription obey that I do that I really enjoy. And I finally just finished the last and final body comp program phase, and it was
Woohoo!
really, really hard. And it definitely pushed me. And I think I complained during the whole thing that Kevin had to hear of me being like, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. But it definitely like helps a lot, like really targeting different muscles and like really increasing my weights. Like I was like lifting like 15, 20 pound weights and like these really stuff. So it obviously does work, but
Yeah.
it's also really hard. But as Glennon Doyle says, we can do hard things. So constantly pushing myself. And I just kind of love a program because it's one of those things where it's like, I don't have to think about what workout I'm doing, which I feel like half the time is the hardest part of working out is like, what do I want to do today? I don't really want to do that. I don't want to do this. And like this, it was like, okay, it's this day. Like I have to do this. Like I have to do this day. I have to do this day. So,
and like such a feeling of accomplishment, like as you complete each day and then like each week and then like the very end, like it's just like our type A personalities of being able to like check off the boxes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so satisfying. And also I really liked the way this one was like set up. Like you started out with like a little like 4-round Tabata as a warm-up, and then you had like your first circuit and like your second circuit and then like an ender. So then like in the first circuit I'd be like, oh my god, I hate this, but I only have 2 more rounds of it. I only have 2 more rounds and then it's done. I don't have to worry about it. So it was easy. Nice. I liked being able to like, I know what's coming because it's the same moves each week. You're just increasing reps, increasing rounds, increasing weight and everything.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, I can do this. I can mentally do this.
Yeah.
Like,
it's nice to like, yeah, exactly. Like having that plan of like, it's easier to get through versus just kind of like, okay, what's going to happen now? I don't know. And it's kind of up in the air and it's like, okay, I just have to do this and then this and then this, because we all know that like mentally, like that's the hardest part about like exercising, about like increasing, like whatever it is you're doing is like just getting over like the mental hump of it, you know?
Yeah. A lot of the instructors said that a lot as they were like, your body will do whatever you tell it to do.
Exactly.
Like, if you keep saying, I can't do this, like your body's going to follow. So you just have to keep being like, one more. And then if you have to, in the middle of a round, drop your weights to a lower one, but like, just try it. Like you never know until you try, like basically.
Exactly. So,
that is my perk of the week because I finally finished it and I'm really happy. Nice. I'm sure at some point I'm going to go back and do all of them again because I'm a masochist, but it was super fun. So that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what was your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is that ever since we've moved back to Knoxville, my dad comes and visits every single Tuesday. And it's just adorable. And my daughter gets so excited to see him. And she asks about him like the rest of the week. Like she'll like look out the window and she's like, Granddaddy, Granddaddy. And I'm like, no, Granddaddy's coming next week. And now she'll like look out the window and she's like, Granddaddy next week, Granddaddy next week. And I'm like, yep, that's right. And then I'm like, no, now it's today. But like then she like sees him like coming down the driveway and she's just like yelling at the window and she's like waving to him and she's like, Granddaddy, Granddaddy, hi, Granddaddy, hi, Granddaddy. And she's so excited to see him. And I'm pretty sure he is equally as excited to see her.
I saw the like teddy bear Valentine's Day, like teddy bear thing he got her. That was so cute.
Yeah, he got us matching Valentine's Day teddy bears. So he brought one for me and he brought one for Millie, and it's adorable. But yeah, like just so nice. I talked before about how nice it is to finally like be back and like have that connection, you know, with family and friends like in person again. And my dad is a very routine person like I am. So like it's funny that like, okay, every Tuesday at this time is his day and he's coming over. Which is also funny because I talked before about how he always listens to the podcast like every Tuesday as soon as it comes out, and he like texts me about it. And then this week it was like Thursday before he texted me about it. I was like, Dad, you're slacking. Like you're spending too much time here with me. You've got to listen to the podcast. But yeah, so it's just been wonderful to get to see their relationship blossom and to get to spend more time with him and him to get to spend more time with her and all that good stuff. So that is my perk of the weeks because it's been multiple weeks now, but you know, just really on my mind today. So
did it finally make all the stress of moving worth it?
Yes, for sure. Like I finally like I thought about that the other day too. I'm like, for so many months of just like nonstop stress of like all the things I had to do to sell that house, to get Andrew a job, to physically move, to like buy this house, to get all this stuff. And now like I'm like sitting the other day and enjoying just like, and I'm like, okay, like this was the whole time when I was like, you're going to get to this point. You were going to get to that point. You just got to keep.
And you got there, and I'm sure you're going to find some more chaos soon.
Exactly. Like there will be something else to stress about. There's always something to stress about eventually, but at least that part of stress is over now.
We'll move to the next part. We'll find something else.
Exactly. Find something else to worry about. But if you guys want to tell us what you're worried about, what you guys are stressed about, your dads, your workout programs, your Valentine's Day plans that have already happened at this point.
Yeah,
Yes,
this
they
is a week
have.
later.
Yep. Let us know
Are
what you
you
did for
pregnant now?
Valentine's Day. Yeah, let us know. I am not. I know you were not asking me personally, but just wanted to clarify that. But let us know if you are. So you guys
Yeah.
know where to do that on all the things. Also, please check us out on patreon.com/caffeinated crimes if you guys want some bonus materials and some other fun goodies. As we mentioned last week, our significant others did a Valentine's Day history episode for you guys. You guys get to learn about that, which is super interesting. And then also hear those bozos telling the story. So
That'll be crazy. Which I had a great idea because we were talking about when are they going to record it? Because at the time of this recording, they haven't recorded it yet, but we're just going to pretend like they have. But what if they did record it on Valentine's Day?
Oh, that would be cute. And they could have
Because
a
that
little,
would be like
a
with
little
the
bromance
theme, and then
date.
we wouldn't have to deal with them.
Perfect. That sounds like a
We
win-win for
get to send
everyone.
them away somewhere.
We
No,
get to,
just kidding.
okay, Courtney comes over and we can drink wine together and celebrate. And
Yeah.
then they,
Exactly. We have Galentine's, they have Valentine's.
exactly.
Anyway, I don't know. Just
Perfect.
anyway. But yes, patreon.com, you can hear that bonus plus I don't know how many other bonuses at this point, like 20 something.
A bunch.
We're cranking them out. And you get a lot of other perks over there. So just check that out. And if you wouldn't mind just leaving us a 5-star on Spotify,
Yes.
Apple, wherever you listen, like on YouTube, subscribe, thumbs up, all those goodies, that would be great. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.